everyone. My name is Saurabh Sharma. I was part of the National Youth Science Camp in 1994. And then very recently have just kind of started up again in terms of just volunteering this year. And so just learning the organization again and understanding the different components of the organization. Today we have a speaker with us, Elissa Levy. And she's going to talk to us about quantum computing and her journey of teaching quantum computing to eighth graders. And we're very much interested in kind of understanding how she went about doing that. But let me tell you a little bit more about her. So she graduated Yale in 2009 with a Bachelor's of Science in Physics. And after about 8 years in a hedge fund industry, she joined the New York school system teaching fellows in 2017 and became a high school physics teacher. She completed her MS for teachers from Pace University in 2019, and she teaches at the High School for Climate Justice in East Harlem, New York. And I think she may have recently changed schools, and she can tell us a little bit more about that. She regularly incorporates conversations about race and equity in her physics classroom and participates in nationwide teacher communities working on equity in the science classroom. She likes to teach teens to think and collaborate, and her goal is for the next generation of global citizens to collect useful data, conduct careful analysis, and really take action to make the world more just. And she also actively partners with educators and professionals in New York City and nationwide to create and run programs such as STEM Teachers Math, NYC, and Equity Lab. So with that, I'll hand it over to Elissa.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. It is really awesome to be here. As Saurabh mentioned, I just recently switched schools, so I'm now at Hunter College High School in Manhattan, and this is their lab prep room. So I was NYSCAA delegate in 2005, and it was just an insanely transformative experience for me. I just loved my camp experience, and so I'm excited to stay connected to the community, and now that Zoom is a thing that we can continue to connect in different locations. I think I attended one reunion in Boston in 2010 or 11, something like that. But it's great that we can do this on Zoom. So I have been teaching now for 6 years. Before that, I worked in finance. And one of the most important things to me, as Saurabh mentioned, is equity, and in particular, making sure that what students are learning in the classroom is actually connected to life and actually connected to what matters. And similarly, I want this talk to be connected to life and connected to what matters to you all. So please, please, please unmute yourself and ask questions, put questions in the chat. I do not know how to get through an hour of talking without asking questions or getting engagement. And so I look forward to that engagement with my audience here. And if you're watching after the talk, reach out. I'm easy to find on the internet, and I don't believe that any conversation is contained within a finite time or place. So let's just keep chatting. Specifically today, my topic is quantum computing and how I teach quantum computing to my 8th graders and my 11th and 12th graders. So really this is an 8th to 12th grade curriculum, but it's the same curriculum I used when I ran a summer workshop for teachers. And so really it's for any age. And the idea is we have to expose students to these cutting edge technologies, even if the traditional curriculum doesn't necessarily prepare us to do so, because we want students who are going to be able to go into these fields, and if not, to be informed citizens who are going to ask the right questions and help guide technology policy for our country and for the world. And so my discovery over the past year or two has been that it really is possible and not that crazy to teach what seems to be crazy concepts to a younger audience. So I'm going to share screen with my slides, and I'll also put my slides in the chat for those who are here on Zoom. So organize my screen. And my most recent iteration of teaching this was last week. So it is fresh in my mind, and the slides are in the chat. So I started by telling my students, we're going to do quantum computing. we're doing it as a one-off topic, and I'm not going to test you on it, but I am going to make you tell me what you learned, because that'll make me a better teacher of it. And there's two pieces here. There's quantum and there's computing, and then we'll put them together. So we started with computing. Step one, what is computing? And as a reminder, interrupt at any point, ask me questions. You know, we are a community. I am not the only voice that should be speaking. So I said to my students, first of all, what is binary? And so I'll ask you all, if you want to put in chat, what is binary? Like, what do you know? Or, you know, feel free to unmute and venture an answer.
0 and 1.
All right, so we've got 0 and 1. And my 8th graders might not necessarily know binary in the context of computers, but then I'll say, what is bi, right? Oh, bi is 2, okay. So if something's binary, 2 possibilities. And there are plenty of things in our world that have 2 possibilities. A coin can be head or tails. A light can be on or off. Not a light with a dimmer, right? If it's a dimmer, it doesn't count. And so 0 or 1, right? If we allow fractions, then 0 and 1 is no longer binary. We've got all the numbers in between. But if we only allow, you know, integers, 0 and 1 is binary, up or down, binary, only 2 possibilities. And then I said, well, can we encode information using binary? And so students love codes. I gave them this sentence and I said, here's some, you know, 0s and 1s, and here's a key. Use the key to decode it. And they, you know, with gusto, they're like, I'm going to figure this out, right? I think it says we love quantum computing. So they don't need to know that this is ASCII and that this is the official way that computers translate letters of and characters into 0s and 1s. But the idea is that you can use 0s and 1s to encode things that are more than binary, right? There are 26 letters, and we are using something that has only 2 possibilities. As long as you have enough of them, you can encode something that has 26 possibilities. So great, right? But binary is used to store information, and we define the term bit is a single 0 or 1. All right, we've done a ton of computing in all of 2 minutes. So the next thing we talk about is logic gates. And I have students kind of look at these symbols, and we spend a lot of time drawing truth tables. So let me grab a truth table. I'm just going to leave it on the slide. So for the AND gate, this truth table right here, I'm going to zoom in on it for everybody. If your inputs, well, now we have to assign truth and falsehood to our bits. So let's say that 0 is false and 1 is true. And I went through with my students. I said, all right, let's create this truth table. I'm going to have a statement like, today is Monday. And I'm going to have another statement like, my name is Elissa. And so if we did like, is it the case that today is Tuesday and my name is Saurabh? Well, that's false. So that's a 0. And is it the case that today is Tuesday and my name is Elissa? No. Is it the case that today is Monday and my name is Saurabh? No. Is it the case that today is Monday and my name is Elissa? Yep. Okay. So that's 1. And I have students construct truth tables for and, for or, for not, for NAND, and figure out like, how do you set a set of rules? What are the different rules you could make given possible inputs? What are the possible outputs? And then I ask them some more challenging questions, like if you put a not, right? If you take the not of both of your inputs and then you do an OR gate, what do you get? And that's called a negative OR gate, which is different from a NOR. NOR is you do the OR and then the not. Negative OR is you do the not and then the OR. And we just play with logic gates. And this takes a good 30 minutes with my students, because I have them draw out and figure out, what are the outcomes and what combinations of symbols are the same. And so what they think they're playing with now is statements, right? They think they're playing with statements, logical truth, logical falsehood, and figuring out, like, I could wire a computer And if I told the computer that these input statements have these values, it would tell me what the output statement is, which is great. I mean, I'd love to have a computer do that, and then I don't have to. And so with multiple gates, you just create a longer truth table. I'm going to pause for a moment because I just don't know the background of the folks on the call. So maybe give me a thumbs up in the Zoom if you're good, or unmute and ask a question if there's a question at this point. All right, getting some thumbs up. So we have established what is binary. We have established what is a truth table. We could talk about, is a gate reversible, right? Which means, is there enough information in the output that we could go back and figure out what the inputs must have been? So for an AND gate, that's not possible, because if you tell me that the output's 0, I don't know if it's because the inputs were 0, 0, 0, 1, or 1, 0. And then it turns out when you get to quantum gates are always reversible. And so that's like a neat kind of vocab piece that I add at this point in the conversation. But we're still in classical computing, regular, computing, define the word bit, and then we get into numbers. So here's the next set of the lesson, which is, how do you talk about numbers? We'd only so far been talking about codes, right? You can encode a letter with a bunch of zeros and ones. You can encode a statement that's true or false with zeros and ones. How do you encode numbers? And so my 8th graders are all familiar with the idea of decimal notation, right? 583 means 5 100s, 8 10s, and 3 1s. And so binary numbers, well, that works the same way, but now our power, our base is 2, right? So we have 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, 2 squared, and 2 cubed. And so they practice going back and forth between writing a number in binary and writing a number in decimal and figuring out how to connect that together. So we're now at a place where we know that numbers can be written as zeros and ones, and we know about truth tables. The next step is to connect those pieces. And I have them first add decimal numbers the long way. So 583 plus 241, I'm like, all right, do it. Don't use a calculator, just do it. So 3 plus 1 is 4. 8 plus 4 is 2. Carry the 1. 5 plus 2 is 7. Plus 1 is 8. Perfect. All right. Do the same thing in binary. 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Wait a minute, our base is 2, right? We can't write a 2 here. We only have zeros and ones. So what is 2? A 2 is a 0 and a carry the 1. And now we have 1 plus 1 plus the 1, so right, so 1 plus 1 again is 0. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1, 1 in binary. So now we've done addition. Same addition that you've always done, but now we're doing it with a base of 2, so you can't go above 2. All right, now let's make it a circuit. So if you were to add 2 numbers in binary, there are 4 possibilities for what this rightmost column is. Either it's a 0, 0, or it's a 0 plus 1, or it's a 1 plus 0, or it's a 1 plus 1. In each case, what's the outcome? And given the outcome, let's make a truth table. And so I have the students create that truth table, and they end up in a place where they say, oh, so my truth table is, and let's make it together. So if you're looking at the rightmost column of your addition, you have, if they're both 0, then when you add them together, you get 0. And if one of them is 1, they'll add to 1. So that's either 0, 1 or 1, 0 will both add up to 1. Or if they're both 1, 1 plus 1 is 0, carry the 1. So this is your sum of the two numbers. And then the second piece you need is the carry, keeping track of whether or not you need to carry a number. You only need to carry if you have 2 1s coming in. Otherwise, you don't have to carry anything. And so we construct the circuit for a half adder, and we construct, ultimately, if they're interested, I don't usually go this far with 8th graders, you can construct a full adder. So use logic gates to make the circuit that does addition. So now we can do computer things. And so you can test a few cases and figure out, okay, this is it. We just wired a circuit that does addition. We just did computing, right? Now we can do all the math computers can do. What's multiplication? Repeated addition. What's subtraction? Oh, that's addition, but you have to, do negative numbers. Division, repeated subtraction. So once you've got the concept of a full adder, you can logically extend it to any kind of math. And then we talked about universal gate sets. So the idea that you can have a set of gates that together can be used to construct any logic gate. And so if you only have 2 or 3 gates, you can make absolutely anything with it. And so that's where we are ultimately going to be able to head with quantum computers. So that was the end of computing. I'm going to pause for a moment. Thumbs up if you're good, unmute if you have a question, and then we'll go on to the quantum piece. All right, seeing some thumbs ups. So step 2, we're done with classical computing. We're now ready for the quantum part. And I do not teach my 8th graders everything I learned in introductory quantum mechanics sophomore year of college. I'm very, very selective about what I teach them, and their minds are sufficiently blown that they're really, I wouldn't want to add more to it, right? This is I think, the starting point I've landed on that I find particularly helpful. So the first thing I do is I show them this block circle. And for those who are familiar with quantum computing, it's a block sphere. But if you do the full block sphere, then you need imaginary numbers. And I don't like to put the imaginary numbers in right away with the 8th graders. I'm not going to show the label. So here we have a circle. And we've already talked about the fact that we can have a bit that is up or down. We can use up to represent 0 and down to represent 1. So right now this bit says 0. And I'm going to do this. And I say to the students, oh, and what is this bit now? And they all shout 1. All right, great, right? We're in agreement. Up is going to be 0 and down is going to be a 1. And I say, all right, so this is 0. Okay, and this is 1. And then I ask them to describe to me geometrically what is a NOT gate, right? So a NOT gate takes a 0, turns it into a 1, takes a 1, turns it into a 0. That's what the NOT gate does. It flips your bit. And so how would I take this arrow up and how would I turn it into an arrow down, and vice versa? What is an operation I could do that would make a 1 into a 0, 0 into a 1? They all confer, they talk about it, and they generally come back with mostly the same answer. They say, rotate it 180 degrees. I say, beautiful. So now if we had a bit in space, now this could be an electron spin. You don't even need to know what electron spin is, but when the electron spin points up, if only you could rotate it 180 degrees, why, it would point down. And if it were pointing down and you could rotate it 180 degrees, why, then it would point up. And so the students have an idea about this. And then I say, okay, great. So what's that bit? They go, what? Right? What does that mean? What does it mean for a bit to point sideways? We said it had to be binary. And so this is the moment where we start to get quantum-y. And so there's an idea in quantum mechanics called superposition. And so the idea is that if you have a state, you could measure it. When you measure it, it's going to collapse to either be up or it's going to be down. But in the meantime, it doesn't have to be either up or down. It could be a combination. And so there are these coefficients here, and I am transparent about the calculations in case folks want to look, but I don't ask students to reproduce these calculations, alpha coefficient and beta coefficient. And so if I'm going to write this bit as a combination of other bits, there's a 0.92 weighting on the upness, on the 0, and a 0.4 weighting over here on the downness, on it being a 1. And so if I measure it, it's going to collapse in one of those two directions. And the students are like, well, what? Like, what does that even mean? And how does that work? And so the analogy that I've started to use that I think has been helpful is this one. Electrons, so I tell students, electrons have a property called spin. Spin can point in any direction, but when you measure it, you'll only ever get up or down. And I say, think about a spinning penny. When you slam it down, it'll either be heads up or tails up. Those are the options. You take a spinning penny, you slam it down. And in the meantime, right, it's spinning every which way. Similarly, take your spinning penny, slam it against a wall. Now it'll be either heads out or tails out, but it's only going to be one of those things because you slammed it against the wall. So now it's got to be vertical. You didn't slam it down, you slammed it over. And so that matches up with the block circle here, because if I choose to measure in my vertical basis, it's called the basis, I'm either going to get up or down and it'll collapse. If I choose to measure in a horizontal basis, I'm going to either get left or right. And so it's all about a choice of how you're going to measure or the direction in which you're going to slam that penny down. And so the way that this bit is right now, it's half up and half down, but it's 100% right and 0% left. And so it's a matter of frame of reference. And so we talk about superposition, we talk about the Brock-Ket notation. And so drawing it as a ket, which is brand new notation for students. And then we say, draw the bit that has 100% chance being measured as 1. What about a 50% chance? And is there more than one answer? And what does that say about quantum states? And then calculating probabilities for in-between variables. And then we go into operating on a qubit. And so I do show them all of the gates for operating on a qubit, which is, it involves imaginary numbers. And so depending on the student population, we might or might not get that far. And then doing some practice operations. And so if I were to do various logical operations on my qubits, what would I get? And then we talk about classical and quantum gates, a little bit about how you determine the probability. And so the idea that you square the coefficient on the state and that tells you the probability of that state. Superposition is a crazy concept. And when I did my survey after the class, the 8th graders were all like, this is the thing I'm still confused about. How can a thing be more than one thing at the same time? And I'm like, yes, that's correct. Welcome to the paradoxes of quantum mechanics. And so then with this, right, they can actually practice calculating the probability of getting one state or the other when they measure it. What happens when you measure things? And then, and these are some key resources. So I have a few students now who are reading Tom Wong's textbook, which is free and open source. So they are choosing to kind of go deeper than what we did in my class. I did make an online version of a game that's in this textbook, which is enjoyable to play and helps kind of understand all the different states of quantum. And then the last thing that I share with some students, which I will share with you all, is IBM Quantum. They have their own textbook as well, but it is the place to play when it comes to quantum computing. And so once you have a sense of what a qubit is, like what is a quantum bit, right, you can start to write code. And so let's zoom out a little bit. So I'm just gonna remove these for a moment. Delete, delete. So the Y's here is a rotation about the Y-axis in 3D space. And so it is basically your NOT gate. And so if you see on the bottom of my screen, I have a qubit, a quantum bit right now, that has a probability of 100% of being measured as a 0. And if I give it 180-degree rotation, well, now it's a 1. And I give it 180-degree rotation again, well, 2 knots puts it back where you were. And so as students play with the textbook, they can learn more about what each of these logic gates will do to a particular qubit. And then they can start looking at more than one qubit. So you can add more qubits and you can entangle qubits. I don't really talk about entanglement when I do this in 1 or 2 class periods, but you can add, see, now we have 0 and 1. And so now the options are, it could be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, or 1, 1. And so the more qubits you add, the more computations you can do as well. So that was the basics of what I do. I finished it with my 8th graders. I'm going to be doing it with my 11th and 12th graders soon. But I really love getting them into the math, and I love getting them playing with these topics and asking questions and being confused. And I love that they will inevitably ask things that I can't answer, which is my absolute favorite part of teaching, is let's go figure it out together. And maybe nobody knows the answer. And, you know, Google exists in a way it did not when I was in high school. So it's a lot easier to ask for information from experts. So yeah, so that was the set of things that I wanted to cover. And I guess I'll entertain any questions that folks might have.
Thanks, Liz. This is really interesting stuff, and this is the first time I'm actually hearing of it. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around the complexities of this. As as we we hear a lot about AI and machine learning and all of those things broader in the industry. Like, what are the implications of AI and ML when it comes to like quantum computing? Do you have a sense for like what is that? I mean, it seems like there's already going to be like a step function in how we think about processing and like, with ChatGPT and other things. And now if you introduce that on a layer of quantum computing, I can't even imagine like what that does to that field.
Yeah, so I also do a machine learning lesson with the 8th graders and the 11th graders, because I think they need to start playing with the math, because otherwise ChatGPT is just some like mystery box. And right, the more you demystify, the more you empower students to actually do things with it. From speaking with experts both on the quantum computing side and on the machine learning side, my sense is that we're too far away from a place where they merge. Because machine learning takes so many bits of data, right? It's really data heavy. The training sets and the size of your model is just huge. And in the quantum computing world, we don't actually have the technology to have more than, I don't know, 400 qubits. To get a qubit is an extremely expensive endeavor, because you need to get things very, very cold, because stray atoms will just whack things and get them out of their entangled state. And so the amount of energy it takes to get things cold enough and coherent enough is very high. And so quantum computing is really in the baby stages. I think machine learning is much farther down the path. The fear with quantum computing, I think the biggest one I've heard is that because it's so much faster, it'll be able to factor large composite numbers very quickly. And really all of our encryption, bank accounts, social security numbers, government secure data, it's all based on RSA and on the fact that it takes computers a long time to factor things. And so quantum computing, I think, has very specific applications, factoring, protein folding, biological analyses, whereas machine learning, I think, is kind of finding its way into a lot of different places at the moment. And then the crossover between the two is extremely nascent. And I haven't heard anyone give me kind of a viable place where the two come together that, that we're within a few decades of implementing. But that I'm right. I'm just a high school teacher, but this is what I've gotten from, articles and folks I've spoken to. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, very cool. You say you did this with your 8th graders, and then you're going to do it with your 11th and 12th graders. How do you adjust it based on their age? What if you have a kid who's already kind of figured some of this stuff out as you're working with this? is it kind of basic enough and new enough for most of these kids that you teach it the same in 8th grade as 12th, or how do you adjust?
Yeah, it's I have 8th graders who have written their own machine learning algorithms. And so I thought when we got into quantum computing that I would need to make it more challenging for them. But the quantum computing stuff was new. I think a lot of the concepts of quantum, superposition and like measurement and those kinds of paradoxes, it just takes years to wrap your head around it. And so even students who've done a ton of coding and are really comfortable in Python are still puzzling out the quantum pieces, and so am I. So I didn't need to up level it as much as I thought I might have needed to. And I think it's especially too because I love Tom Wong's textbook. So I'll go back to, where is the slide? Nope, this one. So this is his online textbook, and to the extent that students really are ready for self-study, this book is written like you kind of need to know the quantum concepts, but once you know the quantum concepts, it really walks you through the math from the beginning. And I didn't have a strong computing background, and it really does do it from the beginning. And so this is always like, hey, student, you're pretty far ahead. Go read this book yourself, and I'll just kind of show you. So it starts at the beginning. Like, what is binary? And what would it mean to be in base 6? And then builds up to information and quantum information.
So what kind of math background do you need for this? Like, do you need like numerical methods? Do you need like, differential equations? Like, to what level do you need a background in math, matrix, and like linear algebra? Like where do you need the basics to like be able to grasp the math components of this information?
Yeah, so for me, going through it on my own with a few friends and then making a teacher workshop out of it, I needed my linear algebra. I needed to be able to think about what is a basis and how do you describe any vector as a combination of vectors, the idea of a linear combination. So that I found was really important. I tried to do it with the 8th graders without using the word vector, without using the word matrix, and I think that it mostly worked. And then when I do it with the juniors and seniors, I'm going to use the words vector and matrix multiplication, because what is a gate in quantum computing? It's multiplying a vector by multiplying a matrix and a vector. And that's really what it is. So there's a bit of calculus in here, but really the linear algebra is the big thing.
And is there a specific software that you use for these calculations? Like, I know like MATLAB and other things are available for precisely for like vector calculations, right?
Yeah, my personal approach was do the easy ones by hand and skip the harder ones personally. But when you go through this textbook, like they recommend various free softwares that can do the harder stuff for you.
Cool.
You mentioned you spent 1 or 2 class periods on this whole topic, or just on the quantum part? I didn't follow.
Yeah, so I had like a 1.25 hour long lab period, and then what I walked through in 30 minutes on this call took a good 1.25 hours with my students, and they were left wanting more, but the reality is I have other things I'm supposed to teach them this year, so I left them wanting more.
Sure. So is Tom Long's book somewhat like, have you run across the Nan to Tetris book or Nan to Tetris website?
No, can you put it in the chat?
I'll do that. It's I think it goes really deep into computing, starting with logic gates. It was my first experience. Even though I've done a lot of computing programming, the idea of starting at that low level was new to me even, and it's a kind of a neat resource that I've not worked through yet. But yeah, I'll try and find that and post it.
Thanks. It's this constant tension with students is how deep do you need to go, right? Like, in order to drive a car, you do not need to know how the car works. If the car breaks down, it's a little helpful, but even if the car breaks down, chances are you don't even have the part you need. So why does it matter that you know how it works? And so it's similar here, right? To what extent do we have an obligation to teach today's kids this far down versus it's just a novelty because the vast majority of people are working on top of it. And the same goes for quantum computing. The goal with quantum computing is that you separate the hardware from the software, and people are just designing systems to set up their electron spins, and you can write your code on the other side and not need to interact with the actual chemistry or whatnot of computing. And so I feel that tension, and I do have students who ask me, like, why, right? Like, why do we need to go this deep unless we're someone who specifically wants to? And I definitely appreciate that question. Bob, I'm going to pull up your link, and then Brian, yeah, go for it.
I was muted. So I mean, I'm kind of going back and forth here, because if you got somebody who was an expert on quantum computing and tried to have them take this and simplify it to a directed study per se, it might not really condense very well. Coming from an educator's point of view, not necessarily being an expert with that, how would you conceive of this as a potential directed study at camp?
Oh, interesting. I mean, to me, I think it's the textbook that Tom Wong wrote is kind of the launching point for the directed study. It's, you need somebody to bounce ideas off of in a conversation. And so there's a lot of people around to whom one can ask questions. And I find that my own knowledge is enhanced. Like I invited a professor from City College to come speak to students about quantum computing. And just like the more ideas you get from other people, the more you can enhance your own understanding. There are other textbooks out there, but I've just really connected. Like the Tom Wong book is the only textbook that I have read since college that enabled me to learn a ton without feeling like an idiot. Right. A lot of textbooks, when you try to read them by yourself, you might learn, but it's painful. This book actually made sense to me, and I felt like I learned. And so that if someone were doing something independently, I really would point them to start with that book.
Thanks.
Are there any more questions from anybody? So I guess, Elissa, one question I had is, like, from your perspective, kind of, being teaching this material, like, what are some implications, good or bad, that you see from quantum computing?
So good is, and this is a place where I would love to spend more time, is how do you classify mathematical problems? So the first time that I ever heard about P and NP completeness and all that was at camp when I was a delegate in 2005. And I learned about exponential time and polynomial time, and it really captured me. My understanding, and I've talked to folks at IBM Quantum, like we don't really know for sure exactly which subcategory of problems quantum computing is going to turn into polynomial from exponential, and which subset still remains exponential. And so in terms of implications, like it's really neat that a lot of problems that are really hard to solve will get easier on a quantum computer, because we've got the ability to do basically to perform an operation on a superposition of states. And so you can, one operation counts as happening on many states. And so that enables a lot of important research, especially in biology. Protein folding is just so complicated. And so imagine being able to say, take the 1 million possible configurations that this protein could be in and put it in some, interaction with some ion solution in the body, and then and so do all of that, and then go ahead and calculate all the different possible configurations this protein might have afterwards, right? That's much easier with a quantum computer than with a typical classical computer. the risk is a security risk, right? Is all our stored information is based on things being hard that quantum computers will make easy. To me, the biggest open question is the math. Like, I don't know that anybody has done the math to show from a formalism standpoint, like what is now possible and what is not now possible with this new technology. So I'm just like curious to see what results come out of math from this standpoint. The people I've spoken to are much more practitioners than they are mathematicians. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. No, that's very helpful.
How well did the students take to the Brockett notation?
I had to introduce it. So the first time I introduced it, they freaked out. And then with my next section of 8th graders, I had learned and I was better. And I warned them in advance. I said, remember the first time you saw this symbol? I gave them a plus. And like, it made no sense. What is the, why are you writing the letter T in between two numbers? No, that's not a T, that's a plus sign, and it has a meaning. Let's agree on the meaning. Okay, so I'm about to draw a new symbol on the board that you've never seen before. And it's, you know, like, don't freak out because it's gonna have a meaning that'll make sense to you when you play with it. And then it got better. But I didn't warn them sufficiently with the first set of 8th graders. I did warn them sufficiently with the second set of 8th graders. And I think it's true of any notation, right? It's just, it's a foreign language. And so you're about to learn how to say hello in a new language. No, you haven't heard this word before, but you know the concept for it. And so it's like, you know what a bit is. We've been talking about it. Now I'm going to write it in a new way.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions for Elissa?
Yes, I had one. I'm curious about like some of the research that's going on with quantum computing. What kind of challenges are some of these researchers facing? And then, like, you know, there's some things you mentioned about, like, you know, like medicine and other areas that could benefit from this. Like, what are the potential limitations, right? If we at one point where quantum computing becomes more cost effective, are there still going to be some other limitations that we need to worry about?
Yeah, my understanding from talking to practitioners is it's just very finicky systems to manage. Things have to be so cold and so vacuumed. And there are a number of different ways that people are creating quantum systems to do quantum computing on. You can do it on electron spin, you can do it on states of ions. And so you need to find a system that is not going to lose its entanglement or lose its quantum state because of some stray atom kind of flying through your container. And so it really is a lot of engineering. And then the limit, right? We only have made maybe 300 or 400 qubits together because once it gets big enough, it just is too complicated. So I don't actually know what they are doing to increase the number of qubits they can have in a calculation. But once you get higher than we are at the moment, that's when you start to see the benefits. Like, I don't think anybody in the world is specifically benefiting from quantum computation outputs yet, but we're on the path towards it. And the limitation is the chemistry and the physics of the systems themselves.
Great, thank you. Oh, and I have one more. I've been seeing a lot of like shows and, you know, like movies, like Ant-Man, Quantum Mania that just came out, and, you know, they're talking about quantum computing. Any shows or movies you recommend that kind of capture this area that's like more true to life about, you know, the things that you're talking about, or is it just a lot of it's just kind of made up? Curious.
I am so ill prepared for that question because I am the world's worst consumer of popular media. I have 2 kids at home, and everything I watch is for ages 2 to 5. So nothing comes to mind, but I think that's a good project for me to take on is to form my own opinion about where quantum computing in popular media is accurately represented and where it's not.
Well, glad I could do that for you.
Are there any other last questions for Elissa? Okay, well, with that, we want to thank you for your time today, everyone, and Elissa, especially you. I know it's the end of the day for you, and so we definitely appreciate you making time to educate us a little bit more about quantum computing.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to see everybody here and to talk about a thing I love, and it's super fun. So thank you all.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.